You fucking idiot, Woody! Pixar movies are considered to be some of the highest quality blockbuster animated movies to ever exist. But what is the ultimate Pixar movie? Introducing the ultimate Pixar tier list. We come to only the third entry in the ultimate Pixar tier list, yet we arrive at our first sequel, Toy Story 2. There is no doubt that this film has big shoes to fill, yet somehow it tells a creative new story while expanding on previous characters and exploring some really interesting themes. However, the question remains, does Toy Story 2 surpass the first film? How does it hold up as a sequel and as a Toy Story film? This is going to be quite the interesting thought bubble because Toy Story is sort of this universe within Pixar films, and a lot of Pixar discussions, there's always which Toy Story film is the best. I've heard countless people say the first one is their favorite, the second one is their favorite, the third one is their favorite, and I've heard them also say that between the three of them, one of them is their least favorite from the first, second, and third. I've heard every single person have differing opinions, and a lot of people even changing their minds, me included. As a kid, Toy Story easily was my favorite one. I preferred it over the sequel. I thought it was by far superior, and that opinion has changed. There have been moments in my life where I would say I like Toy Story 2 more. There are moments where I would have said I like Toy Story more. So this is a very conflicted placement for me on where I place this on the tier list. It's going to be really, really tough. Before we even get into the discussion, you kind of already know where it is placed. If you know where Toy Story 1 is placed, spoiler alert, Toy Story 2 placed the same place, same spot. Placed around the same spot, I should say. But I have to look at this, use some analyzing, and I have to rank one of them higher than the other. I wish I could tie them, but unfortunately I can't. And I have to ultimately decide which one is better, Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2. But before we get to the comparison, which is going to be a segment of this video, most of this is going to be talking about Toy Story 2 as a film, independently. And I know a lot of its accolades and impressive nature comes from the fact that as a sequel, it is wholly dependent on the first film in a lot of ways, being a 2 movie, being a sequel, that is. However, I'm going to sort of push that aside and not really talk about this in terms of a sequel, but in terms of a film, and then analyze it as a sequel, and that will ultimately help where I place it. Enough of the mumbo jumbo, let's get to it. Toy Story 2 is a fucking really good film. I love it to death. I think it does a lot of amazing things. The biggest strength for this movie is character. And I think this movie does a phenomenal job really diving in depth to some characters, but really one character in specific. Now, I'll touch upon some others because I do think there are some characters that get a really big glow up from Toy Story 1, and those are mostly the side characters. Whether it be Ham or Potato Head, they're more involved. They may not have the same snappy one-liners, but they have their jokes, they have their gags, and they hit, and those characters are great. I think the side character that has the biggest sort of glow up is Rex, who has almost a little mini arc from the very beginning, losing in a Toy Story or in a Buzz Lightyear video game, I guess, and him sort of trying to overcome that, and then him actually fighting a toy Zurg. It's great. It's really simple, it's very silly, and it's not necessarily something that takes up a lot of the limelight, but it's there, and it's a really cool, funny side plot, and I really appreciate the fact that they put it in there, and it really makes Rex that much more compelling in this film. I think the only character that I would argue is probably weaker, the only one, is Buzz. Now, that's not to say he's a bad character in this film. He's not. He doesn't have that same interesting arc that he had in the first film, and I'm already comparing the movies, god damn it. It's just that I feel like Buzz in Toy Story 2, just talking about Toy Story 2, Buzz in Toy Story 2 sort of doesn't have this interesting arc, but he definitely is sort of the typical hero, the one to go forward on this mission, and they sort of make that interesting with certain gags and set pieces, but they do introduce Buzz, a Buzz who's like the first film, very delusioned. And they have that as like a running gag that goes on throughout the film. I feel like all of Buzz's best scenes, or his best scene in particular, and his best scenes in general, but one scene in particular, is that when he's interacting with Woody, who, by the way, is that one character that is and so are his surroundings. Jesse is great in this film, as is the prospector. They're all just so compelling, but Woody by far goes through not only the best arc, but the most character dissection. Now, I'll talk a lot about him when it comes to themes, because I think most of the theming around this film and the sort of thematic elements they explore almost entirely surround him. But there's no doubt that he is the heart and soul of this film. Kind of like the first one, although, like I said, both of their arcs, being Woody and Buzz in the first one, were sort of dependent on each other's. Woody's arc is not dependent on any other character but himself. Or maybe you could say Andy, although Andy is not really a character as much as he is, a figure in these films, especially in the first two. He doesn't really have that much of a character, besides just being a child. Which is a great choice. It really helps these characters bounce off what is mostly a blank slate or a regular kid. And that sort of crisis that we'll talk about when it comes to the theming in a little bit is really what makes Woody shine. But he's by far the best character in this film. And I think Woody in Toy Story 2 may be one of the best characters in any Pixar film. Like, it is his arc and his story is really that good. Now, before we get to the stuff I really want to talk about, which is theming, a few things I really want to touch upon really quick. Just like Toy Story 1, I know I'm comparing them, but it's sort of equal in this way, so it's not really a comparison as much as... what is a comparison? But I'm not really saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying, just like Toy Story, it returns to that quick, gaggy, non-stop punch comedy moment. Bop, 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 never ending. The writing in this film is coming from Bug's Life, which had very subpar writing. It's refreshing to come to a film that I think may have some of the best writing of any Pixar film. The writing in this movie is fantastic. Not only the dialogue, but situational events and general sort of like plot direction and the meaning of plots and character arcs are it's just fantastic. It is phenomenal. Besides incredible writing and incredible characters, I do want to talk about the animation. The animation is a huge step up from not only the first film, and I know I'm comparing them already, but not from the first, I gotta stop myself, but not just from the first film, but from Bug's Life too. This movie holds up extremely well. The opening sequence in this film, while I don't think it's as like strong as the first film in terms of like hitting, as terms like setting up like this idea and themes, it definitely existed to show off the animation at the time, and it still really holds up. It still looks really, really good. It's a great action set piece, particularly the scene with this bunch of robots on screen. It's just like pretty impressive. In Bug's Life, they crammed all these bugs on screen, and sometimes it looked cool, sometimes it kind of looked really outdated, but making this take place in a video game was a really clever workaround. I feel like what this film does is have clever workarounds, because the human faces are still uncanny. They're better than the first, but still they're a little bit off-putting in there, and the walk cycles of human walking around also are a little bit off-putting. Sometimes you see them in one scene, you see them in like sitting in cars, and they just don't look right. But unlike Bug's Life, it feels like this film had the foresight to work around those limitations, whether it be setting something in place in a video game so it kind of looks video gamey, but also still really age well. Of course, the idea of making these characters toys, which is what they did in the first film, and it really shows off here because they look even better, their character designs, and it's fantastic. The animation still has the gleam and the reflections and the shiny sort of elements, but also, in Al's room, for example, or his penthouse, there's a Woody sort of like cardboard like statue, and you can see like the little seams falling apart or like the little tears in it. It's really, really, really incredible, the attention to detail they have. Or in the scene where Woody gets clean, one of the most satisfying scenes of animation I've seen in a long time. Just watching him get cleaned up, it's just so satisfying. But enough is enough. We gotta talk about the cream of the crop, what makes this movie so fucking good, the themes. I've talked about the themes in Toy Story 1 to death. I'm not going to repeat them here, but I think they're really, really good. And my first comparison from the first film to the second film, I know I compared them a little here and there, but my first big comparison is the themes in Toy Story 2 are light years ahead of the first film. Pun intended. Kind of. This film explores some real shit, like mortality versus immortality. The toys, Woody really, of anyone, explores that the notion that he will not exist forever, that playing with Andy comes at a cost. He is going to break. He has a moment where he will, not be desired because, he doesn't last forever. But he gets the chance to last forever in the film through going to a museum, and he's going to sit behind glass and get to live forever. But also the cold reality sets in that it's not going to get that feeling of playing with humans. So what's better, the rough nature of mortality or the cold distance, sort of almost purgatory state of immortality? And he has to choose between those two. This isn't a Toy Story film, by the way. Throughout the film, he struggles to choose what he wants, and that struggle is really just so interesting as a character to him. He really has to decide, what is my purpose? What do I exist for? And also this sort of idea of being idolized. Woody is idolized in this film. When he gets here, the three other toys are so excited to see him because, well, for them it means something personal. They're no longer in storage. But for Woody, it also is a moment of sort of stark contrast from the first film, in which the first film, Buzz comes in and he is sort of this idolized figure. Woody realizes he's not only an idolized figure to these characters and their certain situation, but he once was an idolized character for the world. And he's this sort of commodity, this prize commodity. They need him for this set. And he sort of like has this almost egotistical way of looking at it. He has this sort of, he feels a really deep sense of value to him, but he struggles because he can't leave Andy behind, because he also has this deep attachment to him. But he sort of has to balance the two, and it really is super fantastic how they write it and deal with it. But there are some really good lines in this film that really highlight how much like these struggles occur within Woody. One of them being a Jessie line where she's sort of like, oh, like, you're a hot commodity. Like, you are this really hot product. Like, you are an important product. Like, almost dehumanizing him. I know he's a toy, but almost talking about it in a capital sense. Like, you are a valued product. And that sort of sums up the scope they view him in, and the scope that Woody has to sort of juggle with. Does he want to accept it or not accept it? And what makes this movie so fascinating is there really is no wrong answer. It doesn't feel like no matter what path Woody chose that he would have chosen it for malicious reasons. There were both positives and negatives for each reason, but his decision to ultimately decide the true purpose of a toy is to be loved by a child, and exploring how Jessie's abandonment issues sort of created the position which she's in, and using Andy as a way for her to deal with those issues is really clever. But this is the first film that really explores, like, yeah, what do toys want? And Jessie sums it up perfectly, where she explains, like, the feeling of being played with is like, you feel like you're this child's whole world. Like, you feel like you're with them, and you feel like you can do anything with them. It's this beautiful soliloquy she gives, and then in the flashback, of course, the tragic one. This movie didn't hit me as hard emotionally as a child, but watching it now, this movie hits me just as emotionally as the first film, and it's just because of the beautifully executed themes. They're so clever. And the film isn't afraid to really take these themes and ride or die with them. It rides. They ride the whole film with them. It doesn't feel like it takes a back seat. This is the whole purpose of the film. And I can see why a lot of people might view this as their favorite because these themes are so strong and interesting. But I can also see why people might think this is their least favorite, because if they're not interesting in those thematic elements, they may not have any interest in this film, because that really is the hook of this film. More than the first film, this definitely contextualizes what it feels like to be a toy, what they desire, and sort of embracing the mortality and immortality of toys, and how toys can serve different purpose, not only as child playthings, but as collector items, not only as the heart and soul of someone, but a capital gain, a money sort of gain. Now the film does definitely take the stance that one is better than the other. They clearly say the whole love and embracing of a child versus the cold nature of it being a product of capital and money. It definitely chooses one to be desired over the other. It makes a big deal when his name is scratched off by Andy, sort of almost dehumanizing him and turning him into this product. The cleaning of Woody feels really satisfying to watch, but it also in a lot of ways is dehumanizing him and devaluing him, because what it's doing is it's trying to make him this perfect product. Meanwhile, at the end of the film, when Andy fixes Woody, one arm is a little bigger than the other. It's not perfect. Andy didn't do, and you can see the stitching too. Andy didn't do his amazing job, because to him, he's not a product. He's a toy, something he loves. And it's sort of this contrasting nature. Maybe one is beautifully crafted and it's done so well, but it's a product. And the other one may be a little shoddy, may not be perfect, but it's love. And it is simple, but the film doesn't. It explores these themes without spelling out the kids. They don't go, hey kids, by the way, Woody, really struggling with his mortality over here. Really having some existential crisis. They are crazy. Instead, what it does is it does it in a very clever, subtle way that can really be appreciated as an animated film. I also think the prospector and his twist is really interesting. Just like the first film, there is this sort of villain, but also the villain is also this sort of thematic element, where in the first film it's between forming a relationship between Woody and Buzz, and Sid's there as his villain, but he isn't really the main antagonist of the film as much as it is Woody and Buzz learning to be friends. In this film, it's the same thing. Stinky Pete sort of is a villain. He's a villain, but he's not the villain. The movie isn't about defeating him. It's about learning how to accept your role and who you are as a toy, and accepting what's worth more. Living forever, but not being loved, or realizing that you are gonna probably not live forever, but hey, you are gonna get loved. There's just so many great lines and moments where Woody just has a lot of self-reflection. One really that is incredible is the interaction he has with Jessie, where she contextualizes for her what it feels like to be a toy, and Woody sort of sees that starting to happen with the beginning of the film, like this could happen to me. Or even when Stinky Pete says the line to Woody, like, is Andy going to take you to college? What do you think he's going to take you to his honeymoon? Like, you're not going to be with him forever. And also I like Stinky Pete in the way that he's sort of like mint in the box, and that's like a cute little fun little gag. But also he has this like complex where he's seen everyone else get taken off the toy stores and he never did, and that sort of pain that he feels inside and rejection of love. But ultimately at the end of the film, it ends with the perfect conversation between Buzz and Woody, where they ultimately decide, like, hey, we're not going to be here forever. Hey, there is going to be a moment, Toy Story 3, in which Andy is going to grow up and need to get rid of us, but we are going to be here to enjoy the ride. We need to live in the moment and love this now. That's what we need to do. Now, for a very quick comparison to the first film, it is hard for me to decide which film I like better in a lot of aspects, but I think each film has its strengths and weaknesses. And I can sort of speak on necessarily some elements really quickly. I think writing-wise, both these films are very, very strong, but I think the second one just has just that much better writing and overall way better thematic elements to it. So I would say if you tie those together, then yeah, this film, Toy Story 2, has better writing and themes. When it comes to emotional hooks, they both have really strong emotional hooks. I feel like the first one is a little less subtle than the second, but it's really hard to compare how I feel watching these movies, but I feel like both these movies hit me very hard emotionally, but I feel like the second film sort of stimulates my brain a little more, while the first one definitely touches my heart, and so does this one. The second one just gets into your head a little bit more, if that makes any sense. When it comes to the acts, I think the first film ends super strong. I think the third act of the first film is some of the best of any Pixar third acts. Like, it's that good, and I think it's much better than Toy Story 2's third act. Now, I don't think Toy Story 2's Toy Story 2's third act is bad. Not at all. I actually think it's really good. It's just the third act of the first film is so superb. It's like impossible to match that. The first two acts of Toy Story 2, however, I think are stronger than the first two acts of the first film, especially the second act. The first acts go toe-to-toe. I think I like sort of the surprise element of toys coming to life, and they definitely have to explore that a lot more in the first film, and I find that really fascinating. In the second film, they can just hit it right off. They don't have to explain how toys exist. They just go right into it. And I think they both have their strengths in that regard. The second act of Toy Story is probably where the movie is the weakest. Now, it's not bad. It's really good. It's not as good as the super strong first act and the amazing third act. But in this film, I think the second act is the best. Toy Story's 2. Oh my god, I cannot speak. Toy Story 2's second act is one of the best acts of any Pixar film. It is that good. That's really where they explore most of the thematic elements. It's really where they explore Woody's character. And I think it's where most of the humor and most of the heart of the film is. And it definitely feels like most of the energy went into this. What makes this film feel incredible is, in a lot of ways, this film almost didn't exist. So I'm sure many of you know this story, but this film once got erased entirely. Pixar lost almost all the footage of this film, but they had it on the like a backup hard drive on some lady's computer. I think she was who worked at Pixar. I think she was out on maternity leave and she happened to have it, and they saved the film. And also early in development, not only did this film go through development hell, it had to be done really quickly, but this film was almost considered to be a direct-to-video sequel to Toy Story. And the fact that all those elements happened in this film and it turned out to be this fucking good is a testament to the ideas, the heart, and the energy that Pixar had when making this film. Not only is this a film that is completely ageless, just like the first one, but it's one that does so many incredible things with the limitations it has. And god damn it, I have to rank it. Is it better than the first one? Is it not? There is no doubt that Toy Story 2 is one hell of a sequel. While expanding so deeply on Woody and exploring themes of immortality versus mortality and the true purpose of a toy, and deeply exploring not only what they crave, but how they crave it, Toy Story 2 really sets out to do something bold. The film really sets out to do a lot, and it succeeds in quite the fashion. With even more impressive, age-defining animation and just as many clever non-stop gags and punches, Toy Story 2 is truly as good as a sequel can get, and it even surpasses the original. Toy Story 2 places itself at the top of the tier list in the S rank. It passes ahead of the first Toy Story film. Its themes and character growth with Woody is too strong to be overlooked. It also has just as strong writing, the strongest writing of any Toy Story film. It's a tightly put together film, just as the first, with a bit of extra oomph to put it at the very top of the ultimate Pixar tier list. At least for now. Well, there we go, my friends. Toy Story 2, the top of the ultimate Pixar tier list. I had to pick one to rank over the other, and I think Toy Story 2 is that much better than Toy Story, and that is a statement to be said. And it's incredible that these two films exist in the first three Pixar films, and they're both that good. But we still have a lot of films to go, and the next film, Monsters, Inc., is one I'm sort of interested to look back on. Now, Monsters, Inc. is a film I've seen a lot, definitely more than Bug's Life, but kind of like Bug's Life, it's been a long time since I've seen it. I want to say it really has been probably since the early 2010s since I've seen this film. Now, I have a lot of memories of it. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, just like I do most early Pixar films, but I'm not sure how I'm going to view this film. I don't really know much about it, and I'm sort of excited to go back to it after not really exploring it for so long, and see where it ranks. Now, I'm also excited to not talk about a sequel. As much as I enjoyed this, I feel like this video it's so hard to separate Toy Story 2 from the original, and that is nothing but a good thing because both movies are so good. But it is going to be really fun not having to talk about and compare sequels, and we're going to have a long time until we get the Toy Story 3. It's basically all originals until then. So I'm very excited for this long stretch. But of course, if you want to see what I think about Monsters Inc. before I upload the video, then you can watch it with me the day this video is uploaded. This video will be uploaded at 10:30 on a Saturday, that very same Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, so about 7 hours later, I will be streaming my reaction to Monsters Inc. As long as you own a copy or Disney Plus, you can follow the timestamp on the stream to watch it with me and hear my commentary on it and get an idea of how I feel about it. I don't rank it. Toy Story 2, I kind of knew going in it was going to be an S rank. It just was, I had no idea which film I was going to put above the other. But I'm not going to rank the film, but you can definitely watch and see what I think of it, and it should be a lot of fun, so check that out down below. Also, make sure to follow my Twitter and Discord. I will tell people when I go, or when I'm going live. I'll post these videos so you can see them first, see them early, and I'm very excited to explore Monsters Inc. It's gonna get monstery. I'm gonna become a child again. I'm gonna take on the physical form of a child, and I'm going to be scared. I'm gonna open the closet door. Be like, "Ah, you in there, you bitch?" Is it Billy Crystal? Is that who plays Billy Crystal? Where are you? John Goodman. Steve Buscemi. Steve Buscemi's in my closet. Most people would find that creepy, but I would find that quite charming.